thinking about it for a while.
Let me know when we're ready, Nick. We're ready? Okay, everybody's good? Okay, I'll go ahead and call to order the regular meeting for November 14th, 2023. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And bumper cars.
I know.
Our mission statement is Learning for Life. Vision statement is Southgate Community Schools, the best choice for students and parents. Brings us to item D, which is the approval of the agenda. I'll entertain a motion on the agenda.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Okay, I have a motion by Dr. Pomponio. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Lamas. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have an agenda. The first item on that agenda is a presentation, the continuity of learning, academic progress, and goals using NWEA and MSTEP.
Right. That is me.
Okay. We can take a second if we need a second.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Are we sure the doors are unlocked out there?
Where?
Thank you.
If I don't come back, it's not. It's locked.
Very good. Well, good evening, everyone. I have the opportunity this evening to talk to you about our Southgate Community School District standardized testing data. We'll first begin talking about NWEA. We'll look at information from fall of 2022 to fall of 2023. This first graphic here shows you information from the students as far as how they scored this fall on the NWEA assessment from grades K through 11. On here, you can see that it contains the reading average and math average for our students, as well as the expected norm for the national norming. You also see on this chart that it has the reading range for the score of the students from the most striving students to the most excelling students. Those are in your far right-hand columns, reading score range and math score range. If you look at the columns, you'll see on this graph, it's illustrated where you can see if we go back here and we're looking at the reading average and the reading norm and the math average and the math norm. When we look at it in a graphic, we can see that in this instance, mathematically, our students are performing up in par with the national norm until about grade 3, and then we fall just short of the national norm thereafter. This is similar in our reading. However, we continue on pace farther, starting to lose a little ground around 5th grade. If we take a look at a deeper dive into the reading of our elementary schools, you'll see there that you have the data for all 5 of the elementary schools. The number, the Roush unit, also referred to as a RIT, is the average score for that school in that grade. And then if you look at the graphic, it shows that you can see each of the different strands for each of the different schools and how they're comparing to one another. This is similar for the math. So at the bottom, oops, my apologies. At the bottom, you can see where it's math, Allen, math, Fordline, Grogan, North Point, and Shelters, all represented by a different color line. This chart here is really interesting because you can actually pull out a lot of different information insofar as the performance of our students. What you see captured in the lines, for instance, if we take a look at Allen Math, you have fall 22, spring 23, and fall 23. So that shows a range of the data for the students from last fall until this fall, so fall to fall. And if you take a look at, for instance, in first grade in Allen, the average score for our first graders was 141 in the spring of last year, 157 in the fall of last year, 157 in the spring, and 157 in the fall. So our students, the first graders, were the kindergartners the year before. So we're looking at the kinder data and the first grade data to give us the fall to fall results for each particular grade level. You can also see in this chart where our students in fall 23, our kindergarten is 0, represented by 0. So our kindergartners averaged 141 at the onset of this school year, and they scored 141 at the onset of last school year. So our kindergartens in this instance are on par. The other table you have on here has the growth norms fall to spring. This indicates what you should anticipate a student who is average, how they should accelerate through the year as far as their growth. So in kindergarten, from the expected grade level norm to what they should achieve over the course of the year in Roush units, or the RITs, is 16 points for kindergarten, and it is 10 points for mathematics. And the chart outlines that for each of the grade levels up to 11th grade. As you can see, in kindergarten, students have much more growth, accelerated growth, anticipated and expected, and it's much less once they get higher in the grades, because it's harder to accumulate those RIT points the farther along you get. So our NWA summary. For our reading scores, the K-12 average RIT score for reading closely aligns with the national norm until approximately grade 5. Around grade 2.5, the K-12 average RIT score for reading starts to lag somewhat behind the national norm. By grade 6, the K-12 average RIT score for reading exhibits a noticeable decline relative to the national norm. Math scores, K-12 average RIT score for math closely tracks the national norm until around grade 2.5. School performance, around grade 4, certain K-5 schools begin to surpass others in academic performance. Variations in spring to fall data are observed among different schools. In the K-12 system, it is consistently observed that approximately half of the students perform at or slightly above the grade level, average grade level. Meanwhile, the remaining half typically perform at or below the average grade level. Any questions on the NWA data?
Not on the numbers right now, I'll wait till you.
Okay.
Dr. Buckler?
Yes.
So the other half, the students who fall below that level, are they on IEPs, or are they special ed, or they're different?
So there's a variety of students that fall in the category that are below grade level proficiency. They could be students who have individualized education plans. They could be students who are in our multi-tiered system of support, or they're receiving additional supplemental instruction in addition to what they're receiving in the classroom. And it could, I mean, a lot of it we're looking at right now is we are post-COVID, and so we are recovering from that as well.
Do you have data on the gap, the COVID gap at all?
So we can take a look, like in the chart that was represented, if we begin to look back, you can see where the students were not at the same level that they are. Last year was our first, as you'll see here, last year was our first like really robust year of having the students back. We were able to teach students about school again. So they, a lot of students were working at home or on the computers and in different settings, and they were not, in a school setting, and therefore they lost, what it means to do school. And so we spent a lot of time helping students to readjust to school, expectations of school, procedures, in conjunction with locating where they're at, meeting them where they're at, and then doing patchwork for the holes that exist because of the pandemic.
Thank you.
But I have some really fabulous news here for you, is that Southgate was recognized as one of the top 5 LEAs in Wayne County for having some great growth on NWA last year. So there are some of the schools that are nearby: Melvindale, Groseal, Southgate, Romulus, and Westwood for ELA, and Melvindale, Southgate, Dearborn, and Allen Park, and Grosse Pointe for mathematics. And you can see,
I'm sorry, can I interrupt with a?
Oh,
I do have
yes,
a
of
couple
course.
questions. Is that okay? Yep. So, I guess my questions are the so what questions. Those are the data. And so it's really the questions are why, all the way down to an individual kid, right? And what's gonna happen, whether it's good or bad, whether they're up or below, what's next, right? So how do we, and the other question was, the numbers we're looking at, they mean nothing to me. Their numbers and whatever a norm is 180, 180 is better than 170, but what does 180 mean? That, I have no idea what that equates to in terms of what a child learned. Is there a way to learn that?
yes, absolutely. The NWA has norming data. It shows you, like, for instance, to come back to this one here. So if we're looking at third grade 192, spring 192, if we looked at the chart that converts the 192, the Roush unit, it may say that that is equivalent to a student who is performing at third grade spring. So there's a chart that converts those numbers into where students would fall insofar as what grade level and what part of the year.
Okay.
So we could get that to you.
Yeah, just, I guess, and whether I know it or not is less important than what do our teachers think about that? And what is our curriculum or recovery plan for all of that? And I assume that's what each teacher builds with every kid?
So we have some really great things that are happening today. I had the opportunity to be out in the district doing walkthroughs in our elementary schools, taking a look at the implementation of our collaborative classroom, and a lot of phenomenal things happening in classrooms with students engaging in rigorous content and high levels of engagement. And so I do believe that we are going to see positive results because we have a cohesive program that we are utilizing in our K-5 system. Likewise for 6-8, one of the things that's really beautiful is when you go into the classrooms and you can see that cohesion. So for instance, today I was able to be in a classroom and see how they were teaching a visualization skill on one grade level and how they had built upon that skill on the next grade level, but they were teaching similar ideologies. And so part of our program that we've done to combat this post-pandemic gap that students have is that we've invested in the collaborative classroom, which is a small group instruction model, allows us to be more differentiated in how we're approaching students. We've also created workshop blocks where teachers are teaching small groups of students, and that allows for the MTSS teams to be able to pull students out and provide those supplemental supports without pulling students out of direct instruction. So they're still getting the grade level instruction, and then they are getting the supplemental supports on top of that, meeting them where they're at. And similarly, in mathematics, we've been able to get out and see the big ideas implementation process and take a look at what's happening in classrooms. And we've been able to see from classroom to classroom cycles of instruction. And again, that's that cohesion from grade level to grade level. The students are going to build upon those skills. And so we're in our first year of implementation, but in the next year and the next year, they'll be able to build upon that. And as our students from kindergarten to first grade to second grade have had opportunity to continue to engage in a collaborative classroom. Similarly, our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students up through our even our higher education programs have had opportunity to engage in these programs with consistency and cohesion. We're going to be able to see great gains.
One thing that, just a quick note, there are red numbers and there are green numbers. Red numbers show that kids left the end of the school year at a higher functioning level than the fall, which means it's a signal to us that there's learning loss happening over the summer. So when we're thinking about what programming do we have in place for summer opportunities for kids and where do we direct them, it shows us that summer programming is especially important. Summer school is especially important. Where you see green, kids actually left for the summer, came back and had a stronger score starting in the fall than they did in the spring, which means that we may have had a high representation of forward-line students at summer school that may have counteracted or counterbalanced, what might have been a traditional summer slide. So those are some things that we can use this data to inform us. We also can look and say, are there any fall testing practices for NWEA that might not lead to ideal performance to start with? Because you can also see growth. So you see from fall 22 to spring 23, in each one of those, that's the same cohort of students. In fact, across the whole line, those are the same cohort of students. So you can see that although those students had a slide going into the fall, between fall 22 and spring 23, they grew pretty significantly in the school year. So you can kind of get some patterns at grade levels at schools. How much growth are they making during the year? What's the impact of summer when summer hits them? We can dive deeper now and say which one of these students were actually in summer school. Is that making a difference? Do we need to provide more options? Are our testing practices in the fall artificially deflating scores and showing more rising there at the end with a more robust attention to testing at the end of the year? Is that a systems issue that we have to watch for? Is that happening? Those are all very big questions that it allows us to wrestle with on how are we handling our student performances.
So can we see that data of the summer school?
Yeah, it's on there right there. Oh, in terms of who was in
Yes,
summer school?
so we can see
We
what
can
schools.
absolutely look at where our school attendance was strongest for summer school and see if that had any impact on that.
And also, one more question. So is the plan purposeful when you have, like, from what you said, from, like, let's just say 5th and 6th grade, how it fits into the next step for, like, certain curriculum? So is it, like,
So both the collaborative classroom and the big ideas, and we are currently piloting Math and U as well for our elementary mathematics. They're planned programs that are research-based that, a lot of smart people have put together using the latest and best research in the field, insofar as the science of teaching as well as the art of teaching. So,
Okay, good, thank you.
and each builds on the last.
Good.
I have a couple of questions, I guess.
Sure.
So the national norm, is that current? Is that something that they've just taken at the same time as these? Or is that something that's established over like a time?
It's not-
Is that like a baseline
is that
that just
annually?
exists?
The national norm, because it doesn't change significantly, like from year to year, they do it about every 5 years, and this is from 2020.
So that's hard to say comparing, right, with,
Especially with COVID.
yeah, with COVID
Right.
across, so how, Okay.
Right,
And
so,
then- Yeah, I mean, we're calling it a norm as like it's a benchmark, but it's an old benchmark, not current with these.
With
not
our
right
current
now.
students,
Okay.
right.
It's the same data that every school district
Oh,
has.
no, I understand. I mean, I'm just trying to, for my own,
Right.
where are we fitting? How does it really play into what we're looking at? And then, how does Michigan overall compare to that national norm? Like an average of Michigan, you know, I know you're gonna get into the Michigan data, and that's gonna tell us how we compare to the rest of Michigan, right? But how does Michigan overall compare to that national norm? Is it generally low? Is it generally on it? Is it generally above it?
So, I'm not able to answer that
I
because so
didn't know
many
if it's out
different
there
school,
even.
excuse me. Different school districts use different growth measurement tools, like iReady, NWA, are different assessments that they use to be able to determine their students' growth. And so I don't have that data available, but I could look to see if I could find something.
I'd be curious of the NWA, what is it, NWA? Well, I would be curious of that data that is collected across Michigan, how, I know not all of the districts use it, but of the ones that do, I wonder how Michigan as a whole, if you average it together, compares
how
to that.
NWA and on NWA?
Yeah, how it compares to that national line,
Yeah, I don't know.
I guess I'd be curious, sorry.
We can look into that.
Yeah.
Not good.
No? I mean, does it pretty much portray our line, or is it worse than our line, or?
Depends on who uses it. You know, data can be skewed with rural areas or areas that struggle with teachers, inner city areas.
Sure.
Some states use NWA. I mean, with all due respect to Detroit, if Detroit's using it and New York's not, and you're gonna take a snapshot of the state of Michigan and New York, you're gonna be skewed right off the bat. So that's what makes it hard. But the last NWA I saw, which was last year, Michigan did not, or was not exactly stellar overall.
And then how do we account for students coming and going
To look at it.
in those from year to year? It's,
Yeah, I mean, what we can do is disaggregate out students who have been with us since kindergarten and say, we're gonna pull out those scores. And a lot of times, districts will do that. They'll say, for those that have been with us since kindergarten, this is how they're doing.
I would be curious to see what that data represents. I mean, the coming and going, we have no control over
Right.
where a student left off before and a student sits down. I mean, they might knock that thing out. They might put 500s on everything, and then they're skewing our average one way, or they might put zeros on everything and skew our average another. When we're really trying to look at what are we doing from one to the other, of course, we still want to measure that student, and it needs to
So-
be accounted for, but
Some of the best practices are take a look at cohorts of students that have been with a district 3 or more years. And then be
That's
able to,
fair. But that's not represented in this.
it is not.
Okay.
That would have to be a report that we'd have to order from NWA.
Just,
Yeah, these stats are gonna be complicated too by how many of our students were at home and didn't come to school, and so now they're re-entering school systems where they weren't in school systems anywhere. So we have a new complication there, but I do think our next step for disaggregation, we can take a look at those that have been with us, attending regularly for 3 years or more. I think that's a next step we can do for you.
it's just a curiosity of,
It's a great question.
when you're, well, with any data, by the time you're seeing it, it's obsolete almost, you know? So we do our best, and that's how I think that's how we could recognize some trends or some information
Right.
that.
That's
would
the
be
great
helpful.
thing about data is that it generates questions.
Oh,
And then
sure.
you go look for those answers.
We don't
So
know,
you're
we
more
don't know,
informed.
so
That's
we
right.
don't know it.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I just have a comment. Again, when we're looking at just blocks of numbers that don't necessarily mean as much to some of us up here, it would be helpful going forward as we monitor these things to drill down into it, pull out what you're learning from it and sharing that with us, like, you know, we're going along on the national norm until grade 3 and then we drop off. Why are we dropping off? What happened there? What are we doing about it? How are we pivoting to, you know, the answers to those kinds of questions would be very, very helpful.
And that's the basis of the curriculum adoption we brought you, was the concerns related to this. so that our Tier 1 instruction, when we recognized that we did not have coordinated materials necessarily across grade levels, and coordinated practices or professional development or training, those are all played a role in that first tier, which is we're going to make sure we have an established curriculum that our teachers have had opportunities for training with, and that it's engaging. So our goal, there are things that we can't control. We can't control whether students show up for school. We can't control whether they just came from another district. We can't control whether they took 3 years off during the pandemic. We can't control their home lives. We can't control any of those things. But we can control what we deliver every day as teachers to our classroom environments. And we can say that our goal is going to be focused on what kind of engagement are we going to bring to students and what kind of rigor are we going to bring to our classrooms. That we can control, what we bring every day. And if we focus on that, the scores will show us whether our curriculum is a good curriculum or not, whether or not practices are good practices or not. But scores will ultimately come up if that's our focus. If we just focus on the score themselves, and then we get mired in the, well, why isn't this student performing, or they're not coming to school, so it's not really my responsibility, how can I teach? You can't focus on that, but you can focus on what you can deliver. And so that's what we're focused on right now to address some of that slide, is how are we making sure that there are materials that are engaging in every classroom, and that teachers are prepared to work with those materials, and that we're monitoring how they're being used. These last 2 days of curriculum walks were to monitor how they're being used and what's happening in classrooms. So that's been a very robust process that Katura and the administrators have been pulled into as well. And I think that in and of itself, even if nothing else was done, is going to make a fairly big difference. But then we can get into some of those outliers. Why are these outliers happening? But right now, we're attacking it through base curriculum. But our pandemic plan also has other MTSS reconstruction, making sure that we're not in an MTSS model that simply addresses the needs of 5 kids out of every class, for instance. Because what we found when coming back from pandemic is your proportion of students who needed really intense support was much greater than 5 students. So it became a Tier 1 problem. It became a classroom issue, not something that you can teach by outside teachers pulling students out to teach. So we are in the process of restructuring that intervention process as well, which we think will make a big difference.
We do have a lot of great things that are happening as far as the curriculum, the cohesion in the curriculum, lots of small group instruction, meeting students where they're at, the workshop period of time where it's coordinated, where the students are receiving their supplemental services and not being pulled from direct instruction. That's huge. That's huge in education, because that's been a ongoing issue, is that, students who need supplemental support are then pulled out during regular classroom instruction, and so they're losing more ground because they're not present during the direct instruction the teacher's giving on grade level material. And so we've coordinated so our students are receiving supplemental services while the teacher in the classroom is also providing Tier 1 and some Tier 2 services to their students in small group instructions, while other kids are engaging in learning activities that are interesting and engaging, and they have them thinking about things using higher order thinking skills. So there's a lot of that is happening in the classrooms. It's really great to see.
Okay.
So I'll go quicker through the numbers then. So we're celebrating that we did show a good amount of growth for our MSTEP scores. And so here you can just see the bar graphs, but what I can share with you is that for our ELA scores, I'm looking at ELA right now, our average increase was 4% overall. So our students from the year before to the last year's instruction made 4% gains in proficiency, which is why we're on that list, because that's pretty significant in a post-pandemic era. And so we have that 4% average, and then we have a 5% average increase in our mathematics So we do recognize that we have students who are, as I shared previously, that are not meeting grade level expectations. And that's not just a Southgate issue, that's a everybody issue, because students are returning to the classroom, they're learning how to be students again. Teachers are returning to the classroom in a regular way, but they're not teaching the same children. So they have to teach differently, which can be uncomfortable when you're, used to doing things in one way, and now you have to try to approach it in a different way because you're serving different students. But we can see that we are demonstrating growth with our students. 4 to 5% gain is a good gain in the post-pandemic era. And we have goals that we're working towards. So, and we're working tirelessly towards these to have highly effective Tier 1 instruction happening in all of our classrooms. That'll be evidenced by the number of students being referred out for Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports by 20%. Because you can't send kids out and intervention your way out of a Tier 1 problem. And so because we're so focused on Tier 1 instruction, having high quality engaging instruction happening in the classroom, utilizing tools from last year that we engaged in with visible learning, having students that are using time on task efficiently and effectively, and teachers engaging in cohesive programming from year to year, we're going to see that Tier 1 is going to impact students being referred out for those supplemental services. And then our annual goal is to ensure that 85% of our students meet or exceed their NWA growth targets. How NWA works is that students are mapped, and therefore students get their amount that they need to grow per year is really assigned to them. And so teachers know what the expected growth target is for each individual student. They work together, they set goals, and continue to work towards that. And so our district goal is 85% of students meeting or exceeding that, and that's a really good goal for now. And we have increased standardized test proficiency by 10%, and that's really a stretch goal. Because as I shared with you just moments ago, 4 and 5% is pretty good, but we want to, push further, push beyond that. Thank you. Any other questions?
No question. Okay. Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Next on the agenda is citizens' comments. As we have no citizens here, I see no one who would like to make a comment. Go ahead and close the public comment and move to the consent agenda, which consists of minutes from the October 24th, 2023 regular meeting, HR update, the October 2023 disbursements, and expulsion of student 29403. I'll entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Okay, I have a motion by Dr. Pomponio. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Ms. Angel. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes. We have no action items, and that leaves us with the adjournment. Entertain a motion on adjournment.
Mr. President,
Mr. Green.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Green. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Dr. Pomponio. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.